Yeah, I do think there's a spirit once again as the kids in the back of the math class. Like there's a certain spirit that like it never quite died. There's Occupy Wall Street
Yeah,
where our economy went down and nobody went to jail. Whatever derivatives were, whatever the speculate, nobody went to jail. And then
yeah, yeah.
you fast forward and hot topic. I feel as though populism took over with Trump. You know what I mean? There's like a populist argument, us versus them, 1%. It's
Wow,
like
big time.
the elites versus the rest of us. And even though Trump is totally an elite who's been rich his entire life because his dad was rich, he made it seem like he was just one of us. Like, oh yeah, he's one of us, and it's not the elites. I I feel as though this GameStop thing, where it's sticking it to the hedge funds that are shorting GameStop, was really just a connection between the dissatisfaction from 2008 and then populism. And then now, hey, let's go throw in social media where we can get on these chat boards, like assemble, and then go ahead and affect change. Kind of like January 6th,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
insurrection, very
I think
similar.
there are cross currents, cultural, and not to mention technological cross currents
Hmm.
underway. Some in parallel, some in opposition. Is that the right word?
Yeah.
And moving in different directions. And I do think it's important to we got to segregate the Trumpism just for
Mhm.
a second, because most of it is, as you say, has elements we know from history. Some entitled asshole has the ability to marshal, a cult, a tribe of followers. But when you look at the cult members, when you look at, the tribe, whether they were white nationalists or racists or fascists or, you know, they were already there. That's the thing about the irony of America First is that
Mhm.
that's what American fascists organized. That's the banner under which Lindbergh and the isolationist fascist Americans pre-World War II, that's the banner under which they organized in opposition to the war that had already broken out in Europe, right? America first, right? We're not getting involved in another European war, some of which was just sentiment of people who had already fought a war in Europe
Yeah.
and 20 years earlier and were unwilling to go back. But, some of us were straight up anti-Semitic fascists. Um, and so, okay, we kind of need to separate that, because one of the other cross currents to which you alluded, which is the march of technological progress,
Mhm.
right? The app thing was going on whether or not fascists, neo-fascist elements of our society were being legitimized
Mhm.
by wealthy assholes. That could happen anytime. It happened in the 1920s and the 1930s in Italy and in Germany and in Spain and in Portugal, right? Franco and the Nazis used the Spanish Civil War as their beta test,
Mhm.
for the Stuka dive bomber and all their military technology in 1936. So, at which time, by the way, the Japanese had just burned down Nanjing, China, right? There's a whole, right, imperialism and fascism and all that stuff. They're not new. We already went through that in the last century. It came from the same place, and it came down to assholes in leadership, and none of it in the 20s and 30s had to do with jazz, and none of what happened in this decade, if you go back and start with the Tea Party and roll in the Proud Boys and end up with Donald Trump, none of
Mhm.
that had anything to do with the not so smartphone.
Mhm.
It did have to do, by the way, with fake book. So, I
Mhm.
mean, there are issues.
Yes, there
And
are.
yes, there were issues with the jazz lifestyle, right? I mean, and its antithesis, which was prohibition, because prohibition always works, right? So there were, I mean, I'm not saying there aren't issues in culture, in cultural evolution. Not even to we can't even begin to think about Jim Crow and all of that stuff from that era. But my point is that there is a technological foundation for the changes that have happened in this decade. There, and ironically, some of it contributes to the ability of ISIS and MAGA and all these other movements it actually facilitates their organization and the herd movements that are associated with it. And in the same way, the technology has facilitated a kind of, as you say, an Occupy movement, a virtual Occupy Wall Street movement, for which the similarity, another similarity is striking. I thought, my recollection of Occupy Wall Street at the time was that it wasn't clear what the point was. It was kind of like Occupy was, in fact, the objective.
Yeah,
but once you got there,
fuck Wall Street.
Okay,
that was
here
it.
we are.
Yeah.
Now the alternative we propose is, I'm, going to go back and trade index, equity index funds, ETFs on my computer, like I did before. And so this, this kind of stick it to the man phenomenon in GameStop has a certain echo in that. But I'm just guessing, bless their hearts, that most of the fans of GameStop, the actual entity who are lurking in the shadows here and all bought one share. It's just that there's millions of them and they were organized on social media, which is what makes this so fascinating, is that, there's enough fans out there that would like to see GameStop continue to exist in some form. If it were me, if I were hired to be a management consultant, I would say, you still have a store? Like, you're not the Amazon of, I mean, and if you think about malls in general, right? Malls stopped being about the stores about 10 years ago, which means 20 years ago. It's just 10 years ago that the mall owners figured it out. And so they started adding experiences, the restaurants, the cafes, and whatnot. And that's a work in progress, because the pandemic just completely pulled another leg out from the stool of why do people go to a shopping mall? Well, it's not to get, I'm sorry, man, my UPS guy comes by my house almost every day with something that I just spur of the moment realized I needed and ordered on my phone. Save me a trip to the store. So these things are always changing. GameStop is sort of an interesting, reflection of a moment where people in a fan base actually were able to, organize a collective action and engage in a space that previously hasn't been known for that. So it's kind of, by the way, I shed no tears for the short sellers who got caught with their pants down.
Melvin Capital specifically. It was Melvin Capital that had the hugest short position on GameStop. Look,
the difference between them and some of the guys that got the kids that got blasted this week in their Robinhood accounts is that the hedge fund managers know that that's the risk that they face.